Good to have you on here.
Thank you. Good to be back.
We'll hopefully we'll be seeing a lot more of him down here as time goes on. And of course, Gavino, Fernandez Jr.
All right.
El Casino tonight. Is that
Yes,
correct?
El Concilio Mexican American Neighborhood
10-4.
Associations.
We're going to be limited on shows coming up till the new year. I think this will be the last one for November.
December.
This is the last show for this month.
Uh,
We may not have but 2 shows in December. I'm not sure yet, but it looks like that'll be it. So we're trying to get on as much as we can, but we did want to get Matt to come on and tell us about the election. He was busy last week. Now the election is 2 weeks old, but nonetheless, it's still been controversial, of course, as I'm sure we all know. He's been making some pretty good appointments from what I can understand. But we'll go ahead and let Matt tell us about what he thinks of how it came out. Of course, you had, said that this wasn't going to happen, but
Yeah.
so at least you've
you can say it, President-elect Trump.
Sure.
elect Trump. Yeah.
Sure.
Well, everybody
you know,
said it wasn't going to happen, right?
you
Not
know,
just
it-
now.
I was thinking he's either going to crash bad or win in a landslide. And I was thinking win in a landslide because I kind of have a hard time understanding exactly how Democrats and liberals can vote for some of the same stuff they vote for. I mean, anyway.
I mean, but that was democracy. The people spoke. Whether we, appreciate it or enjoyed the outcome.
I'm convinced that Hillary stole it from Bernie because
Yeah.
Bernie had a lot of support, which is another shocking. Somebody who claims to be an open socialist, he didn't even hide it.
Well, to me, it's
Look at
more.
all these people wanted him.
To me, it's more defending democracy. Bottom line.
10-4.
You can have different opinions, but at the end of the day, you must defend democracy, or else, what other choice?
Oh,
would
that's
we
right. You
have?
weren't here last week, and we had pictures of all the rioting going on. And my wife liked the one in the state capitol where the state trooper just slung this guy to the ground. And
Let's go to Matt.
Yeah,
or
let's
else
go to Matt.
You and I
Where-
will be talking all night.
give us a general rundown on your take of what came out, and then we'll go into some questions later.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think obviously you have to start by giving the Trump campaign an enormous amount of credit. This was an outcome that I think most independent observers didn't think was likely. I didn't think Trump was going to get blown out. My final prediction had, I think, Hillary at 307 electoral votes. Basically predicted 45 of 50 states correctly. But at the end of the day, he won Florida and North Carolina, which I didn't think he'd do, and then he won the 3 blue states, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Now, when you look at the margin, I think the important thing to understand is that Trump had a very narrow path to victory, but he got the victories he needed in the states he needed to get to 270 electoral votes, and in fact to get well beyond that. Punching through the blue wall, I think, to me, is the single most remarkable part of this. Flipping 3 blue states that Republicans have tried to win for a long time. The fact that he was able to do that, although the margin was really pretty narrow. If you total up the margin between all 3 of those states, you're at about 125,000 votes. So, you could go to the big house in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and to a Wisconsin home football game and a Penn State home football game. And if you flip half the votes at all 3 of those facilities, Hillary would have won those 3 states, and it would have been a very different outcome. So I think you have to start by saying that while the electoral vote margin was significant, the margin within those states that made the difference was actually pretty narrow. You also have to admit that although it doesn't matter in terms of who won and who lost, Hillary did win the popular vote. And her popular vote victory continues to increase as more and more votes come in from California. But look, I think if you step back and you ask yourself, why did Trump win? To me, there's 5 or 6 factors that all came together. I think it was a bit of a perfect storm. First of all, he happened to be an outsider candidate running against the most insider candidate you can imagine. He was running in a change year as a candidate who was a candidate of change. You had 7 in 10 voters that thought the country was headed in the wrong direction. And so the environment itself was very advantageous for Trump. And so he benefited from that. You add to that the Obamacare letters that went out that showed huge premium increases, lack of competition, huge deductible increases. And so people were already feeling economic anxiety out in the country, and they started to feel more of it when Obamacare played into it. You add to that the FBI letter 3 weeks before the election, or 2.5 weeks before the election, that showed that Hillary was back in some criminal liability, which put her on defense the final 10 days. It prevented Trump from being on defense the final 10 days. And it reminded people of what they don't like about Hillary to begin with, which is that she's dishonest, which 6 or 7 out of 10 voters believe, and that she's corrupt. And so at the end of the day, the reason Trump was successful is because Hillary's turnout was not strong. Her voter turnout effort was worse. She turned out fewer voters for her than Obama did 8 years ago, which is remarkable when you consider how many more people are living in the country today than there were 8 years ago, and how many more voters are registered today than there were 8 years ago. So Trump, at the end of the day, you got to give him a lot of credit. I mean, the determination it took to run for office, to put $55 million in of his own money in the primary, to stay in this race when things really got hot and nasty towards him, and to stay focused on the message that he was conveying, a message of border security, a message of renegotiating trade deals, a message of getting the economy going again, a message of draining the swamp, a message of turning the country around. You have to give him a lot of credit. He found a way to win, even though he had a lot of powerful forces really going against him.
Yeah, I read that piece you did in the Statesman. Thought that's pretty good. Although I would disagree with the FBI thing, because these kind of people that vote for Hillary, they don't. She could do anything she wanted, they still vote for her.
Yeah, I think there's a core group of voters that were always going to be for Hillary. I mean, part of the problem that Hillary had is that if you think about it, her campaign had almost no message. They tested 87 different campaign mottos, and the one they decided to use was "Stronger Together." But ultimately, her campaign was a campaign against Trump, not a campaign for anything specific. She effectively was running for Obama's third term. She wanted to make minor changes along the margins. And in a change election year where 7 of 10 people think the country's headed in the wrong direction, offering more of the same, offering status quo is not a good strategy. And so ultimately, she created very little enthusiasm. The one lesson of this campaign is that enthusiasm trumped ground game, right? Trump was able to develop a significant amount of enthusiasm, and that's ultimately what got him to a path to victory in a turnout election where the turnout was not as high as we might have thought it would have been.
And the FBI in the email, while it may not have done what you meant, it did not energize people to go out for sure.
Well,
it stifled them from going out and being more excited about her candidacy.
Yeah.
So that, in effect, it did have an effect from that sense, from that part. You know, it just kept people away. Because I think there was a big number of people that did not vote throughout the country, you know, that also is being compared to those that did vote.
I'm thinking the Obamacare letters coming out, they were hitting people in their pocketbook. I thought that might have had more of an impact on Democrat voters than the email scandal.
I think Obamacare mattered to a huge extent because it was clear that the economic circumstance that a lot of voters were going to be in for the next calendar year was going to get worse. And it was going to get worse because promises that the Obama administration made weren't proving to be true. And so it played into the change narrative that so many voters wanted. Look, at the end of the day, the other thing about Trump is he found a way to communicate directly to white blue-collar voters, particularly in the middle of the country in so-called Rust Belt states, and he found a way to allow them to vote for their social values and their economic values by voting for him. Generally, they have to choose between social values represented by a Republican and economic values represented by a Democrat. In this case, they were able to do both and vote for Trump.
Sometimes you just got to jump in there, Anthony.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Come on out here. Why don't you get that stool over there and sit right in there between
Well,
the
the national outcome also indicated a big increase in the white vote. That was also a contributing factor to his victory throughout the country, not just, throughout the country. And
just let him sit there.
And the other one, the fundamental one was, changing and turning Washington upside down, because he's not a politician per se. He's more a business person. And so right now, Washington is going through a political earthquake,
right.
If you will.
Yeah, that's right. And really, this was the wrong year for Hillary to run as a status quo insider D.C. candidate in a change election year. And so if we had run a D.C. candidate in a D.C. outsider year, it wouldn't have worked quite as well. But Trump is the biggest outsider that we've ever seen. I mean, we haven't had a nominee of either major party that didn't have elected or appointed office experience since 1940. There's never been a president of the United States that's never had government or military experience. What Trump has done is unprecedented. It's totally unprecedented. And so that's part of why I think a lot of us predicted that Hillary would win. That he was breaking all the rules of politics. He was doing it all year long. There was a belief that the Republicans didn't have a ground game. I went back and looked at the ground game statistics. Republicans actually had a better ground game than Democrats did. And it's because while Democrats were bragging about their ground game, Republicans were quietly building the single most effective ground game the party's ever had at a national level in terms of voter contacts done by over the phone and done at the door. So, again,
Worked their asses off.
they did. They worked really, really hard, and they worked in the states where they had to win. And so, to some extent, I think Trump winning Florida by the margin he won it by is more impressive than narrowly winning Wisconsin, Michigan, or Pennsylvania. I mean, Democrats you were talking about, voter turnout of different ethnic groups and minority groups. There was, in Miami-Dade County alone in South Florida, more Hispanics early voted than voted in the entire 2012 election in that county. So Democrats thought, well, we're turning all these voters out because they despise Trump, and we're going to win Florida because we're winning South Florida. At the end of the day, all they were doing was cannibalizing their election day vote by getting people that normally vote on election day to vote early. And they thought that by doing that, they were going to massively increase the numbers of votes that they were receiving. In the end, Republicans stayed very focused on their goal. And again, Trump found a way. A lot of us looked at the polling. This is the other thing that's striking about this race. The polling showed, look, no one had any data that showed Trump winning. Okay, the Clinton campaign didn't. The public polling, the media organizations didn't have it, and the Republican campaign data didn't have it. Okay, even Trump's campaign thought he was going to lose based on their own data. Now they saw that he was catching up. He started to catch up after the final debate and before the FBI letter hit, so he was already trending in the right direction. But they did not think he was going to win. Their last model had him coming up short. So I don't have a lot of embarrassment about not predicting a Trump victory. At the end of the day, I think what I should have looked at is the fundamentals of the election, that it was a change election, that he was an outsider candidate, that Hillary was deeply disliked and not trusted. And those fundamentals ended up mattering a lot more than the traditional ways that we measure campaigns.
Well, before we go any further, I'd like to let Mike Lee know that he has our condolences
Nobody asked me.
from all. Well, you got our condolences from everybody here about your recent loss.
I have a friend in Florida. When Trump got in,
We're sorry to hear about your mother anyway.
thank you. I made a $100 bet with him. I said Trump will win, and I kind of got confirmation from that because I get this strange feelings just from the cosmos, I guess. But I was at a gas station in Houston pumping gas. And I approached the lady, had a car full of children. And I walked up to her and I said, you might, there were conservative leaning books by Melody Angel Elliott. And I said, you might want your kids to read these books. And I said something about politics. And she said to me, I don't discuss politics with anybody. And I gave her my card and it said I work for the Travis County Republican Party as outreach and engagement. And boy, she opened up like we was talking at the bar.
I was gonna say a black man giving out books at a gas station.
And I said to myself, I mean, she enthusiastically just opened up. And it's like, I said, and I went home and I told Nate, I said, Nate, Trump gonna win.
Oh, you need to speak up.
I say people are going to come out and vote who haven't even voted before in their life.
You can take that right out.
And
man.
I heard a guy. I was watching TV last night, and this guy said he hadn't voted in 48 years, but he voted this time. And
that enthusiasm Matt was talking about.
And I tell it straight, because I talk straight. I told Nate, I say, Nate, I'm gonna tell you, these white folks in the country gonna come out and vote like they're gonna come out like roaches.
Come on, Billy Bob, let's get on that.
I mean,
Appalachians, everybody.
I say that's what's gonna happen. Because they really been waiting to be heard. They tired of all of the diversity politics.
Yeah, racial politics, sure.
We're all Americans, and that's what happened. Was Americans voted,
I agree.
and the idiots hit the streets.
Yeah.
And what I'm trying, I want to know where they go. The first couple days, I heard about protests all over my screen. I figured they were going to protest all the way up to the inauguration.
No, they have big protest plan for them right here in Austin as well.
If I'm here, I hope I can get a bunch of people down there. We have a pro-Trump demonstration.
I'd like to do that.
And when I was home in Cincinnati,
My walker and
my buddies told me, man, Michael, some of your Trump people came down to protest with guns. I said, they should have shot them.
Well, I'll say I was very surprised. I think we all were. I followed the media, all the polls, but I remember on election day, I decided to take a look at the Facebook page of Trump. He had 12 million likes, and Hillary had 9 million. You look at the Twitter, Trump had like 14 million followers, and Hillary had less than 10. So I posted it on one of the larger Pflugerville forums just to see what people would think, and everybody denied it. Oh, you can't look at those likes. But you would keep hearing Trump had bigger enthusiasm, he had bigger crowds. The joke on Saturday Night Live was, at the press conference, that was the biggest Hillary crowd she ever had at that dinner. And it's kind of true. Nobody wanted to go out and support Hillary, and Trump was bringing in the crowd. So I thought, yeah, Trump could pull this out. He had more enthusiasm, but you couldn't look past the data. The media, everything, even Fox News was saying that he wasn't going to win. And when I saw the results coming in, and he was ahead in Florida, and then he was ahead in North Carolina and Michigan, by 9:30, you could have called it. He was winning those Rust Belt states, but what was appalling to me was the media didn't want to call it. At 9:30, he was leading in all the Rust Belt states, but the media didn't want to call it for Trump because they were in disbelief.
Right.
They couldn't believe it. And they waited basically until the end, until basically Hillary called Clinton and said, I concede, I can't win. It was a shocker. And, any pundit that, said that they weren't surprised, I don't see how you can be surprised. It was a shocker, but pleasantly surprised, so.
Yeah, and I did have Hillary winning, and I was basing that on data and polling. And in fact, I remember 4 years ago, there was a whole big debate about whether the polling was skewed, right? Whether Romney really was closer than the polling showed. And I bought into that at that time, and I looked like an idiot at the end of it because Obama was able to win that election. And the polling wasn't skewed. The polling was really pretty accurate 4 years ago. So part of my resistance to doubting the data this time was that I doubted it before and had been so wrong. And so look, again, this is a once-in-a-100-year type election. We've never seen a candidate like Trump before that created the enthusiasm he did, that brought voters to the polls that hadn't voted before, hadn't voted in a long time. It looks like Trump got 30% of the Hispanic vote. It may end up being a little bit less once we have all the data, but he still did every bit as well as Romney, and perhaps slightly better. I know he did better among African-American voters than Romney did, but he clearly did better among white voters. A lot of people say, well, women didn't vote for Trump. He won off men. Well, in fact, Trump won 42% of white women. It's a stunning statistic. Now, that was being driven to a great extent by non-college educated white women, where he won by a huge margin, and he was hurting more so among college educated white women. But to me, one of the most important lessons of this election is something that Selena Zito, who was a columnist for the Pittsburgh Tribune-Review, wrote about after she went out and reported on Trump voters in rural Pennsylvania. This is about 6 months ago. And her insight was that Trump supporters take Trump seriously, but not literally. The mainstream media takes Trump literally, but not seriously. At some level, that explains this entire election. Trump voters understood who he was, what he was fighting for, what his message was. They didn't care about, a statement here or an allegation there. They cared about whether they really thought he cared about them, whether he was likely to make the country better. And ultimately, they made a judgment about him and about Hillary. This election was as much about Hillary losing as it was about Trump winning. Hillary had so many advantages. A cash advantage, the media helped her, the White House helped her. President Obama's approval rating was 53 to 56%. The economy was improving. Hillary had a lot of advantages. Ultimately, Trump overcame those advantages.
I think the media really helped Trump because they're really trying to use him as like a clown.
Yeah.
They tried to play it like that, but they just kept putting him out there. And I think the more that they made fun of him, the more strengthened his support became.
Well, you know who else helped Trump? It was indirectly the media, but it was Democrats. I block-walked my precinct. I looked at the data, and I saw Democrats voting in the Republican primary. And I knew they were Democrats, but they wanted a weaker candidate. They wanted to put in a candidate that they thought they could beat by
Right.
voting for Trump, and now they're regretting it because they got who they wanted. Now, granted, the Republicans, got who we wanted with Clinton, and it was the worst of the worst, but Trump pulled it out, and I think a lot of those people that crossover vote are regretting that they did that because they could have put in Bernie, somebody more enthusiastic.
Well, in the back of my mind, I always thought, be careful what you pray for,
Yeah.
because I thought that Trump was our worst option
Right.
at one point.
Right.
I have a very good friend who probably my best friend here in Austin. His son works in the White House, and I told KT, I said, KT, Trump, I believe, is our worst option. I believe, and I think I think they may have crossed over to try to help get him the nomination in Texas, thinking they screwing us.
Yeah, right.
And I think it backfired on them.
Yeah, and Mike, you made a good point about the media, which I think shouldn't be lost, and that is, the elite media. If you look at, I saw a map that showed, I forget what the exact highways are, but there are highways along both of our coastlines. One on the western coast, one on the eastern coast. It was, I think I-95 on the eastern coast, and I forget whatever it is.
95?
Yeah, 95 on the east and whatever it is on the west. But if you basically take the coasts of both sides of the country, Hillary won by 5 or 10 points. You go inside those coastlines, right? The inner 90% of the country, and Trump won by 5 to 10 points. And it's instructive about the media too, because the elite media goes to elite schools. They live in New York. They live in Washington D.C. They live in Los Angeles. They live in San Francisco. They don't ever really spend any real time in flyover country, in real America. And so, they go cover one event in some city somewhere, and all of a sudden they think they understand what real people think. And so because they don't understand what real people think and how their lives actually are, they condescend to average Americans. And I think the sort of Jon Stewart, Stephen Colbert, look how racist and bigoted and stupid these Trump voters are, that whole mindset and that whole attack on average people, to your point, I think really deepened the resolve that average voters had about coming out and supporting Trump. And that's why the rallies were as large as they were all over the country.
I have something to say about the rally that was here in Austin. And the rally that was here in Austin was strange in a way because I had a seat at the rally right next to R.W. Bray, who introduced him. But I was called by CNN that morning. They called you, Pokey.
Yeah.
And they asked me if I could get some people together to go down to Sheraton and do a speech watch. We ended up with about 20 black people from Austin down there. Democrats, Libertarians, Green Party, and all that. And I looked at it like this. I said, Trump comes to town. Black people come together. Moral acts a fool. And as a result of his visit, Moral was gone. We had some black people come together.
Mm-hmm.
And I think from the perspective of being a member of the African American community, the black community, African Americans, that's those hyphenated people. I'm black. I don't know what they are. But from that standpoint, I think the ace in the hole, because as a Republican who happens to be black, you can call Uncle Tom all kinds of names.
Yeah.
And I go on Facebook. I say, "Oh, hey, okay, y'all, call me Uncle Tom now. I'm in camp with Don King and Farrakhan. Who's Uncle Tom?" I mean, really.
Right.
Because it's still, there's some people I associate with who are Republican like me. They talk about how many friends they lost and they can't talk about the election around them.
Right.
My baby brother has shut up. He's been snickering for a year. Trump ticked off the Mexicans. Trump said this, Trump did. Now he doesn't want to talk at all. And that's fine. And I got another buddy on Facebook, Dink, who's a judge in Tennessee. He says, well, Mike, you should be honorable. I should be humble. No, you should be humble. You lost. You gonna tell me how to be? That's not how I roll. But I just think when he pulled out Trump, and someone from D.C. told me months ago, they said, you might like what Trump does in the end, and it may surprise you. But I didn't expect Don King, who spent time in Marion State in prison with my brother.
Well, now that he has been elected, what is expectations do you see in regards to the policies that he is going to be pushing? Because as you know, the media has reported he has kind of taken a little bit steps back on certain issues, and what do you think is
Yeah, I mean, there's
going to be coming out of his administration?
I hope he doesn't back up on black charter schools, on charter schools. Because I always contend that we need black charter schools to instruct and raise not black kids. I don't know if Pokey could tell me how to deal with the world. It's nothing. I'm not mad at you or anything, but it's just the real.
That's a Minister Farrakhan.
You
Black boys go to
Asian,
school
Andy.
with black boys, we talk about black men.
I can't tell you what happens in your neighborhood.
Yeah.
It's just life.
Yeah, and the incredible thing about Trump is that, from a school choice standpoint, he is as conservative and as strong on that issue as any Republican nominee in history. So I agree with you, and I think it's a matter of supporting things like the D.C. Opportunity Scholarship, supporting merit pay, supporting increasing caps on charter schools, looking at the Department of Education and making sure that it's fostering competition.
But I read he's thinking about dismantling the Department of Education.
Hold on here a minute. The first thing you mentioned, D.C. what was it?
The D.C. Opportunity Scholarship, right. So the Congress funds something called the D.C. Opportunity Scholarship. This is something that former Speaker John Boehner was a big supporter of, which does allow for poor minority students in the District of Columbia to go to non-public schools that are better. And honestly, they wouldn't have the opportunity in a city like D.C. without that scholarship. And that's been funded for several years, despite efforts by the teachers' unions to shut it down. But if we step back and we talk about the overall kind of agenda that Trump has, the line that you campaign in poetry and you govern in prose, I think is always true when you talk about presidential campaigns. There's always a reckoning between the promises a candidate makes and the reality of politics, the reality of governing. And so, look, Trump was learning as he goes as a candidate. He said things in June of 2015 that he learned weren't going to be possible 6, 9, 12, 15 months later. And now he's even learning more now that he's getting the full presidential daily briefing that the President of the United States gets. He was getting a more limited one once he became the nominee. But look, as we look at big issues, there are things he can do by himself, and there are things that he needs Congress to help with. The things he can do by himself, any executive order that President Obama put into effect, Trump can undo. And I think you're going to see him do that to an enormous extent on day one. That's going to be regulations.
Like the bathroom.
I hope the bathroom is on top.
There's going to be a list of those things. Sure, I think bathrooms may be on there. I mean, there will be a lot of things on there. Some of the amnesty provisions, some of the regulatory provisions. I mean, they're going through all that entire list to see what's doable on the first day. So that's first of all. You could do executive orders. Second of all, obviously, he can decide who's going to be in his government. Now, from a White House staff standpoint, that's entirely up to him. Congress has no role. From a cabinet and sub-cabinet standpoint, you have to get Senate confirmation. Now, keep in mind, one of the enormous mistakes Democrats made is in the Harry Reid years, they used the nuclear option in the United States Senate, which reduced from a 60-vote threshold to a simple majority threshold the confirmation vote for any cabinet secretary or subcabinet, and for all judges excluding the Supreme Court. So right now, as we sit here, the single most controversial choice he's made is Jeff Sessions, U.S. Senator from Alabama, who's been nominated to be Attorney General of the United States. If Jeff Sessions had to get 60 votes, that would have meant he had to hold all 52 Republicans and go get 8 Democrats. I think that probably would have been difficult. My guess is he may have been able to get there, but I think it would have been very difficult. Now he needs 50 votes in the vice president or 51 votes, and I think at the end of the day he's going to get there. The reason I say that is a number of Republicans who might be unlikely to support Sessions, Susan Collins, the most moderate Republican in the Senate from Maine, has already announced she's supporting Sessions. The leadership is supporting Sessions. Jeff Flake, who's a moderate from Arizona, is supporting Sessions. So, and you also have a Democrat, Joe Manchin, a vulnerable Democrat from West Virginia, which Trump won by an enormous margin on Tuesday, two weeks ago tomorrow, announced he's voting for Sessions. So that puts him at 53 votes when he only needs 50 plus the vice president. So that's going to matter to a great extent as it relates to the cabinet. But at the end of the day, Trump is going to be judged on whether he gets to enact his agenda, the agenda that he ran on, right, which is securing the border, repealing or replacing Obamacare, repealing Dodd-Frank, building up the military, putting conservatives on the Supreme Court. These are the things he ran on, renegotiating trade deals, et cetera. These are the issues he ran on. He needs Congress to work with him on those things. You've got 238 or 240 Republicans in the House. You only need 218 votes to pass bills through the House. So I think the House is going to pass a lot of Trump's agenda. The challenge is going to be the United States Senate, where you still do have to get 60 votes to advance legislation. And so if the Democrats stick together and say no to everything Trump wants, he's not going to get a lot of bipartisan legislation in his first 2 years. What's interesting about that is that the U.S. Senate, the map in the U.S. Senate in 2018, 2 years from now,
25 of them up
is a
up
disaster
election,
for,
isn't it?
I believe it's 25 Democrats and 8 Republicans. And what's important to understand about that is there are 10 Democratic U.S. senators up for re-election 2 years from now,
In states
running
that
from
he-
states that Trump won.
Yeah.
10 of them. So the question is, can those Democrats stay unified behind Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and Chuck Schumer when they're looking at re-election 2 years from now and they're looking at President Trump going into their state and saying, listen, Claire McCaskill in Missouri was unhelpful to my agenda. Heidi Heitkamp in North Dakota was unhelpful to my agenda. John Tester in Montana was unhelpful to my agenda. You can go down the list. So I don't know how successful Trump's going to be in his first 2 years because he's going to have to get 60 votes in the Senate. But if he can increase his margins in the Senate after the first 2 years, he's going to have a chance to have a very successful third and fourth year. But again, part of this is so interesting about him is he's not ideological. He's not a traditional Republican. So I actually think he's going to present issues in ways that makes it possible for Democrats to vote for those things legislatively. And if he's able to cobble together Republican and Democrat coalitions to pass major legislation, he's going to be a very successful president. And I think that's the type of negotiating he's done in business that he's now going to try to bring to government.
Yeah, I had a question. I was reviewing your resume,
Yeah.
and congratulations on becoming our executive vice chair. You worked in the Bush administration.
I did.
Do you think you would work in the Trump administration? And if not, could you describe that process of applying? Because there's 4,000 appointed positions and people might be
Absolutely,
interested.
and honestly, they're going through that process now. I mean, you have to start by deciding who your top appointees are going to be for the most important jobs. As we sit here, Attorney General's been named, CIA Director's been named, and National Security Advisor's been named, and then White House Chief of Staff and Senior Strategist inside the White House. Those 5 positions. You've got another 15 or 20 that really matter, and really 3 or 4 of them that really, really matter. Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, Homeland Security Secretary, and Treasury Secretary, I think, are the 4 that matter most that remain. And so I think they're working through their lists, trying to see who the best people are that they can get to do these jobs. I think they'd like to announce 1 or 2 of these before Thanksgiving, but my guess is they're going to go after Thanksgiving. But look, anyone that's listening or watching this right now can apply to work in the Trump administration. They can go to makeamericagreatagain.gov, makeamericagreatagain.gov, and apply and put their resume on there and say what departments they'd want to work in. And they can, consider going to Washington. Obviously, you need to have good experience. You need to know, you need to be very realistic about how your experience translates to where you could help in the federal government. But
I guess no
There's a lot of
broken
people that can
down
do that.
outlaw truck drivers need to apply. Huh?
Well, look, I mean, I think there's lots of openings. I mean, there's 4,000 jobs in the federal government that they need to fill, all the political appointee jobs. And so if someone wants to do that, they should apply and they should see what happens. You asked me about me. I mean, I think I'm at the standpoint in my career where I spent 9 years in Washington. I really don't want to go back. I left because I wanted to get out of Washington. I wanted to start a family down in Austin. My wife's here. My parents are here. My sister's here. My life's here. And so, you never say never. I mean, if anyone was asked to come serve the new president of the United States and try to help his administration, you'd have to, number 1, seriously consider it, and number 2, really find a way to say yes. And that's why I think someone like Mitt Romney, who's been extremely critical of Donald Trump over the last year, gave maybe the single most critical speech of Trump that I've seen, which he gave at I believe, the University of Utah in Salt Lake City about a year ago. He met with Donald Trump on what was it, Saturday. At Bedminster Country Club in New Jersey to be considered for Secretary of State. He did that because he's a patriot. He did that because he cares about the country and the world. He wants President Trump to succeed, as we all do, because he wants the country to succeed. And so if Donald Trump can look past the criticisms Mitt Romney's had of him, and if Mitt Romney can look past his own concerns about Donald Trump because he wants the country to improve and be in a better place, I certainly feel like we all can do that too, whether you voted for Trump or not. We need him to succeed. He's the unquestioned leader of the Republican Party. He's the president-elect. He's taking office in about 60 days. And the challenges the country's facing right now are as serious as any time in our history. So the work is urgent, and it has to be done by good people doing a good job.
Well, power's like a magnet. Bottom line, power's
Attracts
like a
people.
magnet. You know, whoever's in power, that's where you go. And that's just one of the symptoms of the democracy and the process. You know, so look at Christie. He also brought in Christie after he, you know, dumped him off the
Transition team, yeah.
transition team.
Yeah.
So, you know, but it's interesting because from a education part, what kind of message he sends when he meets with these people that were really, you know, bad-mouthing him and everything, and yet, you know, it's interesting how people are interpreting that, you know, to kind of understand how he really is as an individual. And as a
Pokey, did I
person.
send you that video of the 700 Club?
Yeah, but I don't think I looked at it.
Okay, I want all you guys to have it. I think I have your email address. I'll give it to you.
Well, you got to speak up on your
But
microphone.
he was in that clip. They were talking about how they felt he was chosen by God, and all of my sort of religious friends
Yes, sir.
who are not of my political position, who talk about pray. If somewhere in Ezekiel 23, something like that, I forgot to send you a clip, but it's really in the Bible. This prophet is talking about someone being chosen, and they're going to build a wall.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of things that are going on kind of seem referenced there. Now, I wish I had given that to you so we could talk
Well,
about it.
We'll worry about that one later.
Well, I will add that, you know, I was at a conservative gathering in the D.C. area this past weekend from Thursday till Sunday morning, and with some fairly high-level conservatives, a lot of whom supported Trump, but a few of whom that didn't. And I will say two things about that meeting this weekend. The first is I can tell you there were a lot of people in that room that were praying for Donald Trump. And they've been doing so for over a year, and these are people that believe in the power of prayer. You know, a lot of non-believers and atheists and agnostics are condescending about the power of prayer. I don't see why someone praying for something hurts someone who doesn't believe in it. But at the end of the day, I can tell you there are a lot of strong Christians in this country that were praying not just for Donald Trump's safety, but also praying that God's will would be done in this election. And so I don't for one second believe that wasn't a factor. But the second thing I would say is, again, in that group, there were a lot of people that supported him over issues like the Supreme Court and the future of the country and national security. There were still some people there that didn't. But what I will say is the palpable enthusiasm and excitement about the opportunity that we have right now with 52 U.S. senators, with 33 governors, with 238 or more House members. I mean, Donald Trump was very good for the Republican Party on election night. And that was not something that I expected, not something a lot of people expected. I did predict 52 U.S. senators, so I did get that prediction right. But at the end of the day, the potential here is immense. Okay, we were looking at being in a situation where we lost the Senate, Hillary Clinton became president, and we narrowed our margin in the House. And we looked at losing the Supreme Court for a generation. I mean, the alternative reality, if that had happened, would have been a disaster for 25 years for the future of the country. So my point is only that there are a lot of conservatives involved in the transition effort, working very hard to make sure the best people possible get into the administration and senior levels, help the president-elect become very successful, help have conservative outcomes that will help the country, tax reform, repealing, replacing Obamacare, repealing Dodd-Frank, growing the military, getting conservatives on the Supreme Court, finally securing our border. And so the cabinet's going to matter because at the end of the day, you've got to have experienced people that can fight the bureaucracy, that are going to fight for reform, that are courageous, that want to do the right thing, and that will work really, really hard for 2 or 3 or 4 years to get these things done.
And black Republicans can come out of the closet.
This taking 2 years. If he does well, then we should do even better in 2 years.
What type of ripple effect do you see, Matt, coming down to the state level now that the legislature is going to be coming into session in January?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, obviously, Texas was not in play despite all the bedwetting that was going on about, this is a margin of error race in Texas. I never believed it. There's a lot of people that look totally ridiculous claiming that Texas was winnable for Hillary Clinton. At the end of the day, it's fair to say that Hillary did narrow the margin. I think the ending margin was 6 or 7%. I mean, effectively, Democrats picked up 200,000 or 300,000 votes net in Texas compared to 4 years ago. That's not nothing. It made a huge difference. Republicans lost every single race in Harris County at the county level. They got decimated there. They lost a lot of
Yeah.
races in Dallas County. As we know, Travis County was very difficult. Trump got 28% here. But looking to the future in Texas, I still think the future is very, very bright for Republicans, particularly if we have strong leadership at the state level and we pass conservative legislation on major issues. Now, you look at the state house, which is really the only place where there were any real competitive races. We entered election night with 99 Republicans. We woke up the next morning with 95 Republicans. So we lost a net of 4 seats in the state house. We still have a strong majority. We're still going to be able to pass bills out of the House. We still have a very strong conservative majority in the state Senate. We still have every Republican statewide office. So we're still in strong shape. But listen, we got to get serious about school choice. We got to defund sanctuary cities. We got to pass a conservative budget. We need to do something about property taxes. We got a lot of issues we got to deal with, and our leaders at the state level need to act on those things as quickly as they can.
I got a question. Do you think we could go too far in our conservative agenda to drive? I know there's a lot on our side now who aren't quite as hardcore
Yeah,
conservative
yeah.
as I'm sure you know. Do you see that maybe statewide at least we could go too far in pushing some of these things like abortion bill
Yeah. So
that would draw?
there's always been tension in the Republican Party between the business wing and the grassroots wing, right?
Yeah.
That tension's always existed, and it's more pronounced tension perhaps now than it was 5 or 10 years ago. And you look what business wants. Business wants adequate funding of public education. They want immigration reform, comprehensive immigration reform. They want tax benefits for business. Those are the things they want. That's not really what grassroots conservatives want. You know, they want strong Second Amendment. They want strong pro-life legislation. They want strong values demonstrated. So on the social side, they want tax cuts. They want limited government. They want strong Second Amendment. I mean, those are things they care about. And so, at the end of the day, we got to find where both sides can agree, and we got to find a middle path so we can be as effective as possible. There's always a risk in states that are controlled by one party that they're not forced to be practical enough to do things that are good for the public, and that they don't achieve policy outcomes where the results are beneficial for people. That's always a risk. But, listen, the other thing I just would remind people is Wendy Davis spent $35 million for governor 2 years ago. She did so poorly that they actually lost ground in Texas, okay? They actually lost ground. She lost by a larger percentage to Greg Abbott than the Democratic candidate preceding her. In fact, both Democratic candidates preceding her. I think she lost by 20.5% or 21% to Greg Abbott. Greg Abbott absolutely demolished Wendy Davis in 2014. And so Democrats don't have much of a bench here. You look at the 2018 cycle, you have a governor's race, you have a lieutenant governor's race, you have every statewide office is up, and you also have the U.S. Senate seat currently held by Senator Ted Cruz. Is there a Democrat that can win any of those races? The answer is no. There just isn't. They don't have a bench. They don't have anyone that can... Yeah, they don't have anyone that can raise serious money that's well known. They can put together the type of campaign that could beat one of those Republicans. We'll see what happens with Attorney General Ken Paxton. He's facing some criminal issues right now that I think he's working to get rid of in May when he goes to trial. Our Agriculture Commissioner Sid Miller has faced some questions about some of his activities, although he was cleared by an investigation by the Texas Rangers. So you could perhaps envision Democrats going after those two Republicans. But at the end of the day, I would wager a very large sum Republicans are going to have every single statewide office on Election Day 2018. And so the Democrats are really nowhere in Texas. They remain basically nowhere. They win city elections, they win some county elections in urban areas, but they lose just about everywhere else. And I think they're going to take the wrong lesson from this election, which is, Trump only won by 6 or 7 points. We have a chance to win. They're going to get absolutely demolished 2 years from now in Texas.
Well, let me talk about two issues in Texas, and you talked about immigration and securing the border. I think that one of the expectations that I call in regards to immigration on a national level is that they'll probably issue work permits, because I went to an event this weekend at Cristo Rey. They had a festival, and many undocumented families and workers go there. And they were telling me about that. All we want is a work permit, to be able to come and go just like y'all do.
Yeah.
We don't want citizenship. We don't want, to abandon, because they're very nationalists. It's a totally different culture.
Right.
So I think that he being a business person and he having hired or dealt with hiring undocumented workers, in many of his projects. He has either understanding or, of that type of working relationship. And, but I don't know. That's one of the things that I think that he will.
Yeah, I mean,
kind of go through.
you look at the issue of immigration. I mean, it's one of the things that he was strongest on when he was running as a candidate. He had a very clear message. It was clear what he wanted to do. He communicated that message pretty effectively, and ultimately it ended up being a very positive issue for him politically. I just finished my Austin American Statesman column, which will run next Monday in the newspaper, and it was on the issue of immigration and what I think Trump's likely to do and then what he should do. I think you're going to see him do two things in the short term once he becomes president. The first is he's going to move almost immediately to remove all criminal aliens. If you're an illegal immigrant in the United States and you haven't broken the law apart from when you entered the country, you've lived here a clean life since you've been here, you're working illegally, you're raising a family or whatever, you are not in any danger of being deported anytime soon, and maybe not at all. Okay, but if you are someone who is in jail right now on an attempted murder charge, or you want to go commit a DUI the day after Trump gets elected, you have no right to be in the United States to begin with because you're an illegal immigrant. And if he's truly going to start deporting criminal aliens immediately, which he has promised to do, which would really kind of, to some extent, solve the sanctuary cities issue, that's a big thing. Now, the Obama administration says, well, we deport criminal aliens. Well, they do deport some, but they don't deport all of them. In fact, Senator Ted Cruz questioned the ICE director in 2013 on the thousands of criminal aliens that get released every single year, people that commit very serious crimes. So the federal government does let criminal aliens out. A lot of times it has to do with overcrowding in prisons, but that's a very serious public safety issue. Now, the second thing I think Trump will do, and I think this is something they're exploring right now, and that is to strengthen border security without needing Congress. He is going to use executive orders, I suspect, to try to do something about the border wall. Now, listen, if you've been on the southern border, you understand very well that a 10-foot wall over the entire 1,800-mile border is not going to happen. You can't put a wall in the middle of a river. You can't put it at the top of the 4,000-foot Davis Mountains. At the end of the day, you need a wall in the urban areas, which is where the vast majority of the illegal crossings happen. When they did that in San Diego with former Congressman Duncan Hunter 5 or 10 years ago, illegal crossings went down very sharply. So they're going to focus on the urban areas. Then you can use assets in the more rural areas. You can use UAVs, night vision goggles, personnel, all those kinds of things. So I think from an immigration standpoint, those are two things he thinks he can do on his own right away: deport criminal aliens and get serious about border security. When you step back and you say, well, what happens to the 11 million people that are here illegally? That is going to require Congress. That's going to be something that has to get 60 votes. And I think Democrats are not going to support anything he proposes if there is not a path to citizenship in there. So that's a much more complicated policy issue. It's going to take a much longer time to get a bipartisan consensus. I'm not sure whether Trump can do that in his first 2 years. He's going to do what he can do in his first 2 years, and I think that's where he's going to use executive orders.
The other one is education, and I know he's a real strong school choice. And the legislature, Lieutenant
Governor Patrick, yeah.
Patrick has already in his list of priorities mentioned, I think it's 1, 3, or 4 top school choice. And can I go into my thing now? Because we're going to run out of time. We're going to run out of time.
You know how much I want my party to be involved in what you're doing.
Right. And having said that on education, I think that's one of the things that is, regardless of party, a lot of people are on the same page. That the importance of education, especially in low-income communities where opportunities are very minimal. So what we did as the Consilia, we applied for a grant to the Department of Education, which is through LULAC. It's a national, and we won that grant. We won, so we're going to have a center here in Austin, and we'll be going to be working with high school students at Aikens, Eastside Memorial, Lanier, Reagan. And then middle school will be Martin, Mendez, Paredes, and Webb. And we're just in the beginning process. Marcos de Leon was hired as the center director. There are only 5 in Texas, and Austin became the 6th one. And we're going to be registering. We need to register. We'll be working with 500 families. And it's basically a talent search program where you concentrate on math and science and with all these young kids. And then we have counselors that work with the families to navigate their children through the college process, applications, college tours. So we're looking at having the director come on one of our shows to
Yes, we
give
are.
more information. But we wanted to let people out there know that it is here. It will be offering services. And we look forward in working with, in education, we work with both charter schools and public schools.
Yeah.
Because students shouldn't be penalized for the politics of education. You know, we're charter members of UT Elementary, but we also we'll be working with all these public schools. But it's more, we're not working with the school systems, but we're working with the parents.
Yeah, and listen.
Those are the ones we're working with.
And let me just say, first of all, I appreciate those efforts. If you care about the future of the country and the future of the world, you have to care about education because it literally is the future.
Right.
There's a lot of things about school choice that people misunderstand. In a lot of cases, things are deliberately misstated to try to get people fired up. At the end of the day, education should be decisions that parents make. Because the future of the child should be up to the parent. Right. Now listen, if the parents are not doing their job, it's the job of the local community to make sure that students get educated. There is no reason why any student in America, the richest country in the world, should ever be trapped in a failing school with a poor teacher. And so at the end of the day, you either believe that competition and market-based forces can improve education. They've improved every other aspect of life, right? Every other aspect of life has been improved by competition. In many ways, public education has not because it hasn't been competitive. One of the things about charter schools that people misunderstand, and my wife and I are personally financially supportive of the idea of public schools charter school system, which has a 100% college acceptance rate for every student that's attended IDEA public schools. You heard that correct. 100% of students that attended and graduated from IDEA public schools have been accepted to college. And these are students that come in here that don't speak English, that are from very bad areas, that are from broken families, that have learning disabilities. I mean, it is a really serious problem. A lot of the students that go to these schools. Those schools are there for many hours. You wear uniforms. There's no screwing around. It's a very serious process. But they sell those parents on the dream of their child attending college. And they get the children in there and they make sure that they read the grade level right away and they move them through the school, and ultimately many of them go to college because they're accepted. But charter schools, a lot of people don't understand this. Charter schools are public schools. Right? They're not private schools. There are private schools. Private schools exist. If you have the money, you can send your child to private schools. If you're a rich parent, you already have school choice.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you're a rich parent and your child is trapped in a failing school, you don't leave them in that school. You move. You put them in a private school. You homeschool them. You have all kinds of options.
Those rich people you talk about in D.C. and in
sure.
San
If you're
Francisco.
but listen, if you're a poor single parent with children who are trapped in a failing school, you do not have school choice. And unless your zip code happens to be in an area where they have good schools, you don't have those options. Charter schools have huge waiting lists. For a long time, the state of Texas had obscenely low caps on the number of charter schools that you could build in the state of Texas. Now they're increasing that over time, so there's more and more charter schools being built. One of the things Lieutenant Governor Patrick wants to do is he wants to equalize the funding between charter schools and public schools. Right now, charter schools have to be paid for with private dollars for construction, and then they get a per child amount of money to educate the child. Ultimately, we need charter schools to be treated the same way as public schools as it relates to construction. If we do that, we'll build a lot more of them. The good ones will flourish. The bad ones will get shut down immediately. We'll need more competition, more good teachers, so that more of our students can get a good education and have the kind of opportunities that they deserve to have in a country as rich and as prosperous as ours.
Okay, 3.5 minutes left. We've touched on education here on this show before. As you know, with the Republicans, some of them joining us for the summit we had.
Education summit.
And that was really good. But it looks like we'll only have two shows in December, I think. So, but I would like to make at least early January, as quick as we can, get on an education show.
That'd be great.
Because it's so controversial. With the Democrat friends I have talk about you just taking money from depriving our children. And I'm really hoping that there's some kind of money follow the students bill come out.
Absolutely.
Because that way, I know all these Catholic churches around, they all used to have these schools at them. And you can take the money that follows your student, if you have to, add a couple bucks in there with it, and you can get them in a really good school.
This is exactly what ESAs are. ESAs are educational savings account where parents can save money tax-free, use the money to educate their child however they want. It's exactly what the legislature might look to do.
Tools are great and innovative. One of the important things about this whole movement is that we need to educate the parents about the tool.
That's what we
because
did
you
at the
can go
summit
through legislation, can make all these changes, but if the parent is not educated about and knowledgeable about the tool, then, you know, it even makes it harder. So that's why we do our parent education
It
summits.
was a parent
to
education
educate 'em,
empowerment summit that
train
we did.
them in the different aspects of engagement with the school districts when the parent has a meeting with the teacher and vice versa, so they'll know what to expect and what kind of questions, and that empowers them and
James
makes them
Dickey
more
was
accountable.
involved in it, and
Yeah.
Senator Cornyn's office.
Senator
It was
Cornyn's
all real
office,
good.
yeah. All these, because again, you know, what's wrong? You know, you can't go wrong with quality education. That's the bottom line.
Right.
And this also provides students from low-income areas to eventually break that social cycle. Of just where they become more entrepreneurship, more successful.
Either
Be it
that or-
technical, or be it through a collegial.
Engineer?
Yeah, career. So,
Lawyer? Oh, no, too many lawyers already. We need to go back to engineer. We got a minute left. I appreciate you coming on, sir, and that is right. It can go on and on with education. AISD seems to have no clue why people are fleeing them like mad. But that's for a whole nother topic. You're next, Mike Lee.
Yeah, watch
Stay-
my show.
Stay tuned.
Right Talk with Mike Lee.
Yeah.
Follows this show.
I forget who you got coming on. Kennard?
Kennard is supposed to be coming on there. I talked to Arab Muhammad, but I never heard from him.
Oh, okay, I thought there was a third one. Okay, anyway,
will everyone have a safe Thanksgiving?
10-4,
You
we'll be
know,
back in December, second week of December, I
Especially if
believe.
you're traveling out of town. And this is one of the very unique holidays throughout the country where it's family, everyone comes together. and
Great time of
visit.
year. Yep.
Great time of year.
All right, folks, anyway, we won't be back till the second week of December. But Mike Lee will be on right now. Coming up, don't change channel or computer, just leave it there. Bye. That's quick.